the development of full artificial intelligence will spell the end of the human race.
It's a flying object, and we don't know what it is. I would hope somebody is checking it out.
With the rockets or whatever, but incredibly fast, opposite direction. It was too fast to be an airplane.
I'm glad the Pentagon is looking at this, because if it poses a threat, I want them on top of it.
Well, the craft generates its own gravitational field.
You said there's lights in the sky?
The internet has become the command center for criminals and terrorists.
911, what's your emergency? I need help, please help!
Aliens won't let it happen. You know, that's what we're instructed to say.
Roswell, Area 51. Alien kept deep under the ground.
1, 0,
self-serving. You're here for a reason. You're listening to Troubled Minds Radio. Broadcasting live from a secret bunker just off the extraterrestrial highway. Somewhere in the desert sands outside of Las Vegas. From somewhere in space-time, loosely labeled Generation X on planet Earth. And asking questions of you in earnest into the digital darkness. Well, good evening, and welcome to Troubled Minds Radio. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting. And, of course, 88.4 FM Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight, part two of what our last show was here. We're going deep into history once again to consider not just mythology, not just folklore, but how much we've actually missed when it comes to science. How much of the true reality of the past remains in the ground waiting to be discovered. Well, we started last week, of course, or the last episode, with the Wellman of Sverresborg, I believe is how you say that. We waited 800 years for DNA to actually confirm that saga. Troy was, of course, poetry until it became archaeology, which we talked about last episode. The Kraken was superstition until it became marine biology footage. And in that conversation with Dave Lovegrove and James Salsido, of course, James will join us in a moment here, we realized that when you pull all this together and look at these ideas, there's a ton buried in the ground that will validate a great many things eventually. And so the question then and the question now remains, what do you think we'll find? What will time give us that history has eluded in the archaeological record and in the anthropological record? And how weird does it get? And of course, we've got some other stuff here. We're going to talk about the the Vinland sagas and some other things. And that's what's on my mind tonight. As usual, we will be taking your calls if you want to be part of the conversation. Got questions for Dave or James or myself, 702-957-1037. Click the Discord link at troubledminds.org. We'll put you on the show. It's as easy as that. But before we get into the rest of it, let's say hi to our guest here. And then James in a minute as well. He just put his hand up. Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers. What's up, my man? Welcome back. How are you tonight? And welcome again to Troubled Minds.
It's great to be back, Mike, and g'day to everybody out there listening in Radio Land. And I was just telling my kids, I said, now you got to be quiet because I'm talking to my friend. He's in a bunker deep in the sands outside Las Vegas, somewhere vaguely near Area 51. And I can't guarantee he's not really an alien, but he lives a mysterious life and he's got the best radio channel about this subject. So I'm very pleased to be here.
Thank you. Glad to have you. And I can only vouch for some of that. Only some of that is true. so thank you for that. I appreciate it very much. So which gets us into, let's get James in here too. Get him rolling while we're starting here. So basically we had this huge list, like this master list of all these things that really were once considered myth or folklore and were verified by science eventually. And it's like this massive master list, which we'll get to. We're going to make a series out of this, and we'll do these two now, and then we'll kick some down the road and do some a little bit later. But there's an unbelievable amount of things that used to be phony. It used to be science would go, no, come on, that's ridiculous. There's no such thing. However, on this big list we've got, and we're going to keep that private for now, but we will talk about a lot of those things as we go. There are a number of things and more to be discovered with some more research where this has been really where we belong in the space of asking these questions and wondering how deep this goes. And in this particular place, we're talking what else the old stories remember, I'm calling this, and warrior women and forgotten places, which we'll get to just a moment. And we'll start with Dave there. But James, welcome to the joint. I hope the other show you did went well with Ricky. Anything is possible. Welcome. How are you tonight? And we'll begin in a moment.
Yeah, hopefully you can hear me all right.
Yep, loud and clear, coming through as you should.
Good, glad to hear that. I'm really glad to hear that, especially considering the show I tried to do last night completely did not happen. So, but yeah, thank you for having me again, and good to be with you and you as well, Dave. So, thank you for having me as always.
Yeah.
Glad to have you. Yeah, and we had a massive Discord problem over there with James's show last night. Okay, let's get started then. So, where do you want to begin there, Dave? With the Vinland saga, and then we'll get into the warrior women a little bit later in the show. I think that's maybe appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to give you a quick quote from the most amazing book. It's called Lost Knowledge, The Concept of Vanished Technologies and Other Human Histories by an academic, Benjamin B. Olshan. So this guy's the real deal. He's a professor at Harvard, as far as I remember, one of your big universities over there. This book was suggested to me by the professor of Old Norse and Old Icelandic at the University of Iceland, Armin Jakobsson, who he listens to my theories about the Vikings and aliens and superpowers, and he said, check this book out. So it's very hard to get as a printed copy, but I've managed to get a PDF of it. Once again, it's called Lost Knowledge, The Concept of Vanished Technologies and Other Human Histories.
Okay.
So sorry?
No, go ahead. I was just going to ask, is there a way we can get that? Is it available publicly, at least sort of in an archive, or is this something that's like very, very rare and hard to get your hands on?
Well, if you search it up, I often look for PDFs and I buy the books later. This one doesn't seem to be on Internet Archive, but it is available if you know how to search for stuff. It's just called Lost Knowledge, The Concept of Vanished Technologies. And it is profound, and it's essentially a full-time mainstream academic saying, I think there's a really good case that there was ancient technologies that we've forgotten about. So what this says is, I'm just reading from one of the pages, he said, for these writers, he's talking about, Chaucer from medieval England, Arab storytellers, Chinese chroniclers. For these writers, technologies that were almost magical, such as the power of flight, were attributes of an advanced civilization. The problem, of course, is that when the writers explored these realms, they talked about various machines and devices in a way that is often fragmentary. In one story, a flying machine is said to be launched by pressing a pin, for example, but no other details are given. So this book's all about, he references it in a very scholarly way, all these books, especially a lot of obscure ones from China, from Korea, from different other Asian countries that graphically talk about people flying, that there was people in where we would call Russia who were masters of this art, and about emperors who sent their people over to these people to get a machine made or find out how it was done. He talks about television technology, and a lot about this idea that people in the past believed that there was lost civilizations, golden ages where people had incredible powers and could do things, and that then a cataclysm or something has swept them away. So the book's essentially saying, do we really know our history? Perhaps it's a lot different to what we thought. And it does seem from the old tales that they've preserved a memory of that fact that civilization has risen and fallen many times over multiple millennia. So that's something, you know, I know you'd love it, Mike, and I used a lot for my book, Viking Superpowers, but I'm sort of rereading it for the next one because there's just so much to unpack in this book.
Super awesome. I did find the link, so I will include that in the description down below. It's actually on Stanford's website, stanford.edu, which is interesting. But there was only one other thing I could find with it. But anyway, this is fire stuff, and I'm looking forward to digging into this as well. But we'll talk about some of this tonight as we go, as usual. So this is tonight, like I said, as far as my part goes, I'm going to drop all the disclaimers. I'm here for ideas. I'm here as the idea guy. And I say things contradictory all the time. So from my point of view, there is no truth because truth is always changing. Okay. So if you're here for truth, for my part, you're in the wrong place. This is about ideas. This is about looking at the world and history differently. And this is about having dialogue with other people that can look at this in a similar manner and say, well, maybe, as I like to call it, drinking the maybe juice. Maybe, maybe not. But as usual, you make up your mind as part of this because it's as we gain more data, more interesting insight, and more conversation, things kind of do change. And we're going to skip the break real quick. We'll do one over on Rumble real fast. What's up? So, hi, Michael. This is a pin chat over on Rumble. Thank you for pinning that, friends, and some nice donations. This is from Independent Alberta. It says, hi, Michael. I'm usually seen as Astro Sweat. Appreciate your cast to stretch one's thoughts out of the comfort zone. Thank you for that. And then Independent Alberta, or Astro Sweat, dropped 5 subs over there for our friends over there on Rumble. So thank you for that. We'll do that as our sponsor for the show tonight because Astro Sweat sponsored the show tonight. Why not? I appreciate that. Thanks again for pinning it. Thanks for being there on Rumble, and thanks for enjoying the conversations we have. Okay, let's do it. Let's get to it. James, I gave James a list too. Anything you want to get to tonight so we can kind of put a pin in it as we go, or you want to ride sidecar and then kind of just chip in? You tell us, and then we'll start with Vinland and all the rest.
Yeah, no, I'll go with whatever you all want to talk about, and then just when I have thoughts here or there, I'll give what I have.
Okay, perfect. The ultimate professional, verbose or succinct as the need arises. Okay, so back to you, Dave. Let's talk about the Vinland sagas then. Now, many know that when I was in school, and probably when you were in school, they taught us that Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 and discovered the Americas. Well, that is not entirely accurate. And in the Vinland sagas, we've got some proof of Leif Erikson and his clan actually Eric the Red making it to Greenland and discovering North America centuries before Columbus was even a twinkle in his granddaddy's eye. So we can start with Vinland and tell us what you know about it. Go right ahead.
All right. Well, there's 2 sagas that relate to this. There's the Vinland saga and Greenlandinga saga, which is the saga of Greenland. And as you just mentioned, Leif Erikson is considered the discoverer of America. There was another guy, Bjarni Herjolfsson, who got there, had a look, for some reason didn't go and step on it. So Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, he gets the credit. Eric the Red himself didn't make it. He settled in Greenland after being chased out of Iceland for killing somebody, and then he was a bit of a hothead, but he basically encouraged his son to go because they really needed lumber, and all they were using was driftwood. So the really far out thing for me is that these sagas were written in around 1200, but they have so many details that scholars always consider, well, this really does sound like an actual account of somewhere in North America, probably Newfoundland, right up there in, around Canada. But I was researching this many years ago, and I came across a fantastic story which basically said that Christopher Columbus, in his youth, was a sailor. He went to Bristol in England, and the company he was working for used to trade with Iceland. So the story goes that he went to Iceland from Bristol in England, and he heard about the Vinland saga and Greenlandinger saga when he was there. And he came back and he kept it under his hat. And it seems as if the Scandinavians, at least the Icelanders, knew there was this great land over there past Greenland, to the west of Greenland. But that was just sort of their business. And by that stage, there was a warm period during the Viking Age. And they think that one of the reasons the Greenland colony was destroyed was because in the later Middle Ages, they went through a mini ice age, and the sea lanes iced up, and it took like 100 years to be able to get back to the Greenlanders, and by the time they got there, they were all gone. But it appears that people were going back and forth to the Americas, North America, for a long time, and they had a bit of Indian trouble with the Skraelings, as they called them. And yes, there's some wild and woolly old tales in those sagas, but it seems that Columbus just sort of said, "Oh, Your Majesty, I got an idea that there's something over there." "How do you know?" I don't know. I'm prepared to bet my life on it. I really do believe he had this secret knowledge, so he got the credit, but we found him out eventually. It was us Vikings that went there first. Yes. So you lead me into any areas you want to talk about with this, because it is a subject I've always been fascinated by.
Yeah, the natives in this, again, called the Skraeling. I was reading a little bit about this, and all these links are in the description, by the way, so if you want to check it out after the show. And please follow Dave and follow James. Those links are going to be right on top. Go check out their books. Go check out their YouTube channels. Go check that stuff out before you do anything else. But there's other additional information that I included as part of it, including the Vinland sagas, the Skraeling. I thought it was interesting reading about some of this stuff, and the Skraeling in particular. Like, these were the original Native Americans. These were from hundreds of years ago, where they ran into these people, and even sort of talked about them in sort of derogatory ways. And from what I can tell, and again, this is from, just reading the internet, so forgive me if I'm inaccurate here, but they don't really know the actual etymology of Skraeling, and they think it is some sort of derogatory term, because these the natives were wearing, fur and things like this, look kind of caveman-esque to them. And we're talking the Bronze Age here, and they're Vikings. They're like, what the hell is this? But lots of weird stuff with that, because I don't think, as far as we know, they are really nailed down to who these people were, kind of vanished in the ice or whatever. But they say that the actual one of the supposed translations of this were wretches or little men. And we talked about that in the last space. Is there anything that you've read in the sagas that suggests they are sort of little men, like smaller, diminutive people, like maybe hobbits or dwarves or something like that? Does that make sense?
No, I've never actually come across that idea that they were small. They were fearsome, and it's sort of the story of America all over again, from the settlers coming after Columbus, seeing the people as wretched compared to Europeans, not having our sort of technology, not having. I don't think they had the wheel. They had horses after the Spanish. They got horses from the Spanish, but horses weren't native to North America. But Skraeling means wretches, as far as I know. And what does wretches mean? It's an archaic English word. It is definitely a derogatory term, but as often happens when people give you a lot of curry. I don't know if you guys say that, but in Australia, you say somebody's giving you a lot of curry, it means they're giving you a lot of heat. They're making life hard for you. And I think the Vikings more than met their match with the American Indians, or, the Native Americans. They didn't have steel, but they, arrows worked really well, and they had sticks that they could clock you on the head with, and they were super fit, Like most native peoples, they don't have much fat on them. They're pretty buff, and they have a spirituality and a wildness about them that can be overwhelming, even for modern people reading about them, who want them to be all nice and just talking in sweet platitudes about nature. You read about what they were really like in battle, and that they were like wild people.
Yeah, the old scalping thing was something we shouldn't talk about. And then, of course, it's limited to certain factions. I get it. It's not you can't cast one aspersion as a ubiquitous thing across an entire group of people. Okay, just a reminder that there's a whole bunch of things to take into account, and I'm just saying it for all the disclaimers that do apply. Fire stuff. Okay, so what I'm talking about this in terms of Greenland and this place. Now, does this go back further? Do you think that maybe possibly we discovered North America even maybe 1,000 years prior to Eric the Red and his clan? Or do you think that maybe this was sort of the first commingling? And I know I almost know what you're going to say, because we talked about what's his name, Thor Heyerdahl in the last show. So I would say no. My guess would be no, that this probably goes back thousands of years, the commingling of hemispheres. But I don't know, what's your take on it?
Well, there's that famous St. Brendan story from about 400. This Irish saint who goes to Ultima Thule, which most people consider was Iceland, a land of volcanoes and fire in the middle of the ice. And then he went further, and I don't think it actually describes the native peoples, but in the 70s, this guy called Tim Severin rebuilt a curragh, like a Irish leather boat, but one that hadn't been made for thousands of years, and such a fascinating story, and sailed all the way to Iceland, the Faroe Islands, Greenland, and then to Newfoundland. I think he might have gone a bit further south, but just proved that it was possible. And his idea, and I, going to Iceland last year, I learnt that a lot of Icelandic thinkers and scholars are saying that the Vikings weren't the first people in Iceland, and rather than just a couple of Irish monks. That's always been the story. There was just some hermits there. But these guys said to me that they thought there was, groups of hundreds of Irish people living there in Iceland who'd learnt to live in that environment. And when the Norse came, they basically needed these people to show them how to survive in Iceland. And in all the what's called Islendingabók, which is this great chronicle of all the settling all over Iceland, who took what land and how much, this area where the Irish were is sort of a blank. And this Icelandic guy told me, he said, I think that's a really good proof that these people were sort of off limits. Like, they didn't kill them, as was always the easy thing. The barbarians killed the people. They think more that they united with them at some level, intermarried, and learnt from them how to survive in Iceland, because they'd been there for quite a long time, probably hundreds of years, which makes you wonder, like, did a lot of Irish people go to the American continent?
Yeah, absolutely. We got a question from Derek the Night Stalker coming up, and we got James is going to chime in here as well. Lots of ideas in play tonight. We're talking about not just, let's say, the old ways of Graham Hancock style, sort of where history is deeper than we ever give it credit for, but also we're going to get into the idea that maybe there were sort of those old superpowers that we remembered a long time ago, but we do not still remember. I butchered that. You'll see it's way cooler than I said. Be right back. More with Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers, James Salsido with Salsido Paranormal. Taking your calls and your questions in the chat if you have one. We will ask Derek's coming up, and be right back. More Troubled Minds on the way. Do not go anywhere.
This is Troubled Minds. Your host, Michael Strange, the master of the mysterious, is here to guide you through the shadows of the unexplained.
Dust on the gates, I trace old names with my hand. Vines in the hallways, choking the maps of this land. Boot prints in ashes, ghosts in the glass of the frame. We walk in silence, carrying all of their names. Warrior women in forgotten places, blood on our stories, dirt on our faces, laughing at fear in the broken glass, dancing on ruins that were built to last. We're carving legends in these empty spaces, warrior women in forgotten places. Rusted mosaics, colors that refuse to fade, lanterns like secrets, swinging in doorways of shade. We share our bruises, laid out like cards on the floor, turn them to armor, then kick down every locked door. Warrior women in forgotten places, blood on our stories, dirt on our faces, laughing at fear in the broken glass, dancing on ruins that were built to last. We're carving legends in these empty spaces, warrior women in forgotten places. Who wrote us out of the book? Who buried our burning hands? We light a match in the dark, watch a new border expand. If no one remembers our names, we'll write them in bone and in flame. Warrior women in forgotten places, blood on our stories, dirt on our faces, laughing at fear in the broken glass, dancing on ruins that were built to last. We're carving legends in these empty spaces, warrior women in forgotten places.
Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, and Kick. And by the way, Kick should be working again. I've been tinkering under the hood with the stream, and check Kick for me if you would be so kind to make sure it's working. And we're on the Troubled Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting, and 88.4 FM, Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight, I'm calling this What Else the Old Stories Remember, Warrior Women in Forgotten Places. And of course, we started with Greenland and the Vinland sagas, but I think as we delve into this, we're going to get deeper and deeper into history. And not only that, the idea, as I described very poorly before we went for the break there, that there's a lot of, let's say, human ways to manipulate the body and the mind and consciousness that we may have forgotten. And we touched on that last show a little bit, but I think it's important to reframe this in a new way with the Amazon warriors of old and some of these other things. We're going to get to Wing Chun. As you know, Dave Lovegrove is a Kung Fu master. Many of you may or may not know that. We've talked about him in the past becoming a master, as it were, and did a whole conversation on that, which is fantastic. I got a question to ask Dave regarding Greenland from the Night Stalker in the chat. I think it's a fantastic question, by the way. But James, anything to add to what we've talked about so far, or the idea of warrior women, or anything as we lead into that before we get going here? Welcome back, guys. Thanks for being patient with me in the process and patient with each other. James, anything to add here?
Yeah, just great stuff as always so far. I've been thinking about, just listening to that last segment, I wonder what kind of technology it's going to take, if any, to find some of these, the history in some of these, again, forgotten places and all that. Just because I know that there's satellite technology now that is finding like the foundations or the bases of structures like all across, I believe, South America, in Mexico and other parts of that part of the world. I just wonder, I mean, as that technology gets better, will it allow for more details to be found? Or is there going to be a point where the technology itself runs into a wall or not? I'm just really curious about what you all think about that and what you all think we might find.
Yeah, agreed. And that leads actually into Derek's question as well. Let me read this and then we'll let Dave take it away. I'm trying to fix my camera here. But Derek the Night Stalker adds, any Greenland Hollow Earth or Thule Society type stuff? Basically, I guess in the sagas here. He says, I heard that there's Norse legends of entrances in Greenland. Do you know anything about that, Dave? And also what James said as well as part of the new technology, being able to find sort of these forgotten places of old that may or may not be real. I guess that's what we're talking about tonight, aren't we?
Absolutely. I wish I could say, yes, I know of secret tunnels going into the mountains of Greenland. I really have no trouble imagining that it's probably riddled with them. In the Norse legends, especially in the Eddas, the old so-called mythical stories that I've been digging up and re-envisaging, the North is always the mysterious place where the relatives of the gods live, what they call the Aesir. The Norse gods have relatives up in the Great Sweden, or the Great Frozen Sweden, they call it, which really just means far, far north. Right up the top, and those mysterious lands where no one goes. And there's a famous story of he was the defense minister of Canada back in the 60s, and he told a story about a fleet. I think he said 50 UFOs, flying saucers, coming from the North Pole down towards Europe, and the supreme commander of the Europe just after the war, in the late 50s, I think it was 53, was going to push the panic button because he thought it was the Soviets. And then they sent fighters up, and including astronaut Gordon Cooper, who saw these things, and they turned around and went back over the pole. And I do think there's a massive base up there, probably under the water, quite possibly in great holes in Greenland. But regarding the incredible finding that James was talking about, that is so exciting, because the main problem has always been having trained eyes and the man hours to look at all the hundreds of thousands of photos. That's the main problem, is just they don't have enough resources to pay people to look at all the data that's been gathered. But now with AI, we can set it to go through all the data and all the data of the past. And you'll remember that the Swedish lady scientist who's discovered all these objects pre-Sputnik from old plates, looking at the sky, and they're finding these objects that are there on the plates before anybody had sent anything into space. And I think the same thing's going to happen with archaeology, with all this scanning, and then they're going to turn to lots of old photos that nobody has really taken the time to look over super closely. And I think a lot of stuff's going to start appearing, and we tend to think that academic, universities just have big budgets, but Iceland has done hardly any archaeology on their own stuff. It's sort of shocking, but when I went there looking at the saga sites, I was saying, can I look at the literature about this site? Oh, no one's ever studied it. Like, what? Really? Even the most famous sagas, like hardly anyone's ever done any archaeology on them. So there's a heck of a lot to be done, and I do think it's going to be done by AI and then passed on to the humans.
Yeah, it's happening in South America, Central America. They're finding all kinds of stuff buried in that lush jungle that's been overgrown for hundreds or even longer, hundreds of years or longer. So, I mean, I'm excited for what the future brings when it comes to this stuff. I talk about AI too much, so I'm not going to talk about it directly tonight. But basically, the deal is this. Now, at the end of the last show, we were doing the Kraken. We were doing some other wild things that kind of fit into this in terms of mythology and folklore. But also one we didn't get to, which was fascinating and important, which will lead us into the full narrative tonight, is the Amazon women of Scythia, of Asia Minor, of the Russian steppes, and the idea that even one ancient writer wrote the fact that they were fierce warrior women. They would raise their own daughters and then give the sons to the fathers, who they briefly commingled with, and keep sort of these warrior societies as strictly female. Now, the interesting part, again, one of the wild tales that comes with it, they've never found archaeological evidence of it, but one guy suggested that there was an individual some of these Amazon women would actually remove a breast to have a better draw on their bow and arrow, which is a wild thing to consider. And that's how dedicated to the craft of war they were, that they would sacrifice a part of their body for this. And again, it may be some old wives' tale or whatever, but anyway, to the Amazon women now, I think it's important to talk about that, because we're going to get into, as you know tonight, warrior women in these forgotten places. What do you know about that, and how fascinating and wild does this tale get?
Well, I've always been suspicious of the cut your breast off thing. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just a sort of a story to relate how radical these women were, and probably unfeminine. The writers probably thought that's what you'd do if you were like a masculine woman. But I personally think that there's lost cultures of women warriors that, like being in the martial arts world, it's a sort of a given that people will patronize women and say, "Oh yes, darling, you can be a great fighter like a guy," but secretly think, "Yeah, well, you won't do any good against a male the same weight and size." And even in my style, Wing Chun, which is called women's kung fu in China, literally founded by women, people still don't really believe the founding legend. They think, "Oh, it's just nice, but it's really nothing to do with women." Whereas I'm completely the opposite. My master was a woman, a little Chinese woman, and I can tell you, she was absolutely lethal, and she could create a strength that was beyond any male strength I've ever experienced. And I'm quite a strong male. She could just fling us around like rag dolls, and she wasn't even trying. So I think there's a great long tradition of secret women warriors, and they have been persecuted because especially the Christian church had very strong ideas about a woman's place, and they didn't like any form of women being too independent and powerful, because they saw it as immoral, and a woman needs to be under a man's guidance and this sort of stuff.
Yeah, the tale is old as time.
I'm happy to tell you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I know that. Well, another thing is that there's always this idea that for a woman to be able to match a man, she needs to be huge. Like it's just a sort of a calculation. Well, if you had a 7-foot woman, she could probably deal with a 5'7" man or something like that. That's how people tend to think. Whereas there's not that much about warrior women in the Viking Age, but there's a pretty cool story from way back, considered a myth, but about the sister of these warriors who fight Attila the Hun, and she sort of gets revenge by burning herself and these other guys. But before that, she sword fights with these guys and beats them. And the story that really sticks most in my head is a story, and I'm sorry I can't bring it up. You could probably find it on your internet search pretty quick. It was like a Celtic master woman warrior who young men were sent to her to learn to fight. And I'm pretty sure Cuchulainn, the sort of mythical great hero of ancient Ireland, the son of the hound, that's what Cuchulainn means, Cuchulainn. My Gaelic's not very good. I'm sure he was sent to train with this woman. And I wish I had more to tell you about her. She's part of my ongoing research. I want to find out as much as I can about her and this Celtic woman's thing. But do you mind if I tell you what the power source for women is?
No, I'd love to hear it. I've got that actual thing, the person you're talking about. My Gaelic and Celtic is horrific too, so I won't be able to pronounce it properly, but I do have a little blurb. It's in the write-up tonight, so we're on the same page. But I'd certainly love to hear what the power source of women is.
Yeah, well, essentially what I'm going to say, this is what I'm taught by a very small clique of Wing Chun Kung Fu practitioners who've preserved these ideas through the 20th century till now, but it used to be a family art and it used to be a hidden art, and it sort of still is, because Bruce Lee made it super famous, the art of Wing Chun, but because it was a money maker, people ran with it in the 70s and 80s, and there was a plethora of fake Wing Chun masters who, some made a mozza and some didn't make much, but everyone claimed to be a Wing Chun teacher, and they'd teach you Wing Chun because it was a name to conjure with. It was just like Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, the amazing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu family. If you could say that you'd teach people Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, then that was a surefire attractive for people to your school. I don't know if it still is, but it was for a long time. So Wing Chun got really watered down because people didn't really know the secret of Wing Chun, which is not just how to thump and kick, which it is, but it's a theory of force, we call it. And what it actually boils down to, it's not really men or women, but it's considered that women theoretically are better at it than males because they have less ego about being tough guys. So what it is using a different type of brain, using not the frontal cortex, which is the thinking mind, the conscious mind, but using the rear of your brain, which in Chinese we call it Nim Dao, which literally means mindfulest mind. It means the Zen mind, like the now present mind, which the Chinese considered comes from the heart. It's like they believe that the actual physical heart is the true brain. And I think they mean the whole body's the brain. The frontal cortex in the front of your head is extremely useful for our technological culture and our farming culture. But the old mind is the mind of the hunter, the mind of the wild, the mind of the animal. And that's why Kung Fu's famously tiger style, dragon style, insect styles. What they're really about is not so much just mimicking the animals, but finding their mind. So what this practically means is that when you learn to be into that mind, it's a sort of a process of shutting down, like meditating, shutting down the thinking and feeling yourself in the rear of your brain and just using no force at all. That's the hard thing, and this is where it becomes womanish. It's absolutely soft. Like the softer you get, the more power there is. But this is really difficult for people to accept, and males traditionally can't accept it. It's like, oh, what a load of bull, you've got to be strong, you've got to have big muscles, you've got to be fit, you've got to be, tough. But that's called the hard style. That's called young man's kung fu. And Wing Chun is women's kung fu. It's old man's kung fu. It's the kung fu of people without natural power. And that sounds like it's just a sort of a B-grade version, but it's not. It's actually the most powerful thing. And when I was in Sweden, my friend is an ex-Swedish commando. He owns his own muscle gym. It's a sort of gym where people bend the bars. I said to him, I bet you can't stop me moving my arm. I said, you use every bit of your great strength and try to stop me. And he couldn't stop me. And he said to me, you're the strongest guy I've ever experienced. And I said, no, you can see I'm an older guy. He's only like 35. I said, yeah, it can't be my muscle strength, can it? He goes, yeah, I can see it's your mind, but I don't know how you do it. I promised I'd teach him. But then when I went to Iceland, I ran into a wonderful guy over there who owns his own gym. He's a Taekwondo. I don't know how high he is in Taekwondo, but he's a black belt, multiple dans. He also has a strongman gym. You can imagine how big the Icelanders are. And I said to him, we were at the University of Iceland, I said, I bet you can't stop me moving my arm. So he had that look on his face like, oh, this will be good. And I said, now, this is how it's when you use strength and I use strength. So I tried to use just plain muscle and I couldn't budge him. It was like pushing against a rock. I said, you ready? And then I just disappear. He's not there. I'm not really there. I just move my arm through the air. He got thrown backwards and then he came back and he says, God, that was amazing. Do it again. This time he really tried. I said, now I'm going to cheat. I'm going to move my body just a fraction. So I just moved my body. Then I kept my arm came. He actually flew and landed in this, like a hedge, and came back to me going, holy crap. Like, what is that? I said, kung fu, mate. That's the real thing. And yeah. And I swear to God, I'm telling the truth. I'm not just making this up. This is not bullshito.
I believe you.
It's a real thing. And
bullshito.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that.
There's a story I can tell. Two stories. Would you like two quick stories?
Yeah, real quick. Let me just fill in the blanks on what I know about this. It's not much, but Wing Chun, of course, I learned when I was young because it was a Bruce Lee thing, and he made Jeet Kune Do based on, in part, Wing Chun. So that was one of the things I learned when I was young. I kind of studied Bruce Lee a little bit, but I don't know anything about martial arts in particular. The other thing is we have your entity here, which we'll talk about at the top of the hour because I think this is important. Scatach. I don't know how you say it in Old Irish here, but it's SCATHACH is the actual entity you're talking about that trained Cuchulainn or Cuchulainn, however you say that.
Woman.
The woman, yes. So we'll talk.
Is that a woman?
Yeah, it's a woman. Yep. So we'll talk about her when we get back. Anything to add, James, real quick, and then we'll go to back to some stories, or we can save those for the top of the hour too. Sorry, James has been sitting there awful quiet. I don't have a ton to say here regarding Kung Fu and stuff because I don't know a lot about it, but there's a lot of things that we've covered since you said anything at all, James. Go ahead, bud.
Yeah, no, I don't have a lot either. It's just amazing. And I've known people over the years that have done different kinds of martial arts, and it's always amazing when they talk about their experiences. And so I believe, all these things are, they can be done, and it's amazing to me. I don't have any of that kind of ability that I know of, so it is really amazing to hear about that. So, yeah, just looking forward to hearing more.
You're the best. Go ahead, Dave, if you got time. We got about, let's say, 3.5 minutes, if you can squeeze a story in there, and then we'll do the second one at the top of the hour.
All right.
Go ahead.
Well, these are two tales of power, okay? So the my very slender 45-year-old Chinese lady master, her name was Susanna Ho. First lesson, she says to me, "You're a big, strong guy, Dave. I want you to forget your power. I want you to completely forget all your strength and be as soft as a baby." I thought, okay. I'd sort of heard this, but I thought, righto, I'll do anything you said, because I wanted to also be like Bruce Lee, but I thought this is not how I expected it would work, but I just did what she said. And then she said, "I want you to punch like a baby reaching for an apple." She said, "That's your mantra." Okay, so what does that mean? You know, it is essentially moving like an innocent baby that doesn't use the frontal cortex. So that's what I understand now. It's a baby doesn't think I'm going to reach for an apple. So one night, this huge guy came into our class and proclaimed that he'd been practicing Wing Chun for 11 years, that he was really advanced, but he'd heard that she was amazing and he wanted to train with her. So she said, "Well, let's do some chi sao," which is rolling arms. They started rolling, but we don't try to hit people when we do that. It's more about seeing how your body is affected by force, how you deal with other people's force. This guy tried to hit her, like slap her. So once, she just brushed it aside. Second time, he tries harder. At this stage, me and a couple of other guys started to move because we're going to grab this guy. And I was thinking, but she's the master, but still she's so tiny, and this guy was huge. He's bigger than me, probably 6'3", 4". And the third time he tried to do it, I just saw this slightly grim look on her face, and she took a step. She couldn't have moved more than an inch. And this guy lifted off the ground, flew backwards into the wall, which was maybe 3 or 4 feet back. But he hit the wall off the ground. Like it was like he was just shot out of a big Shanghai. And we were shocked, but he was really shocked. He was like, "What?" And she said to him, "Do the form now, do the first form." So he went through it, did it really badly. She said, "Oh, look, I'll teach you, but you'll have to go back to the start, you know? I'll have to take you right back to the start." And the idiot just stormed out. You know, he should have just got down on the floor and gone, Sifu, please teach me, Sifu.
Yeah, right.
So so I went, holy crap, this is real. Like this little chick just threw that big guy like he was nothing.
Which is incredible. And that's the art of it. That's the art of the entire thing, is sort of to get more from the human body than regular physics and the knowledge of, you know, just punching the wall can really lend you to, which is again your expertise in terms of kung fu and the greater conversation with that. But we're going to get to not just that part, but women as part of it, and the martial prowess of the ancient women, and how a lot of that has been kind of erased from history. They've, you know, it's kind of been, oh, that's a myth. There's no way. There's no chance. But here you are in, you know, 2026 talking about things you've seen with your own eyes that suggest that's false. All those old sort of ways to erase what women were in the martial sense is, it's all on the table. This is all on the table, except again, we'll get back to the rest of this and how it fits into sort of erasing the divine feminine and the rest of that as part of it. Of course, there's a ton there, but more coming up. There's a lot in my mind about this. Of course, a lot in yours. We'll get to James as well. Taking your calls if you guys want to be part of the conversation tonight. 702-957-1037. Click the Discord link at troubledminds.org. We'll put you on the show if you got a question for Dave or James or myself. And we're just talking again. I'm calling this "What Else the Old Stories Remember." Warrior women and forgotten places. So we're going to go to old Ireland when we get back, and also continue with Kung Fu, Wing Chun, and all the rest with Dave and James, and your calls as well. Be right back. More Troubled Minds coming up. Don't go anywhere. Sorry, just dealing with some technical stuff, so I'm a little distracted, but hey, what's new? Be right back. More Troubled Minds on the way. Do not go anywhere.
You're tuning into Troubled Minds, the show where mystery knows no bounds. Stay tuned for revelations that'll keep you questioning the fabric of reality.
Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, Twitch, and Kick. We are broadcasting live on the Troubled Minds Radio Network. That's KUAP Digital Broadcasting. And, of course, 88.4 FM Auckland, New Zealand. Tonight, I'm calling this What Else the Old Stories Remember. This is part 2 of a series of mythology, of folklore, of old stories that used to be phony. It used to be, as they called them, old wives' tales, which is an apt term, I think, in this particular capacity, because we're talking about warrior women in these forgotten places and how a lot of this has been really written off in history as nonsense. And we ended there talking about the Amazon women and Kuuk Chilane and this other individual, and Wing Chun, and all kinds of amazing stuff from Dave there and James as well. And look, basically, the way I see this is, and I've been on the record saying this stuff a long time, is that we don't know what we don't know yet. And kind of looking at these old tales and stories and saying, well, just because they were told by oral tradition forever, it doesn't make them false. So I think we should keep an open mind when it comes to this stuff and consider what we might discover in the near future. And that's that. It's very simple to me. And so, look, I don't entirely believe the historical record as we're told. I don't entirely believe some of the other narratives that are given to us as part of the, conspiracy tropes. I don't know what to believe, to be honest. But I do think there's a whole bunch of this that comes together and is for compelling thinking. And that's welcome to Troubled Minds, basically. So let me get to this real quick, because this is what we were trying to reach for a second ago when Dave was talking about this particular warrior woman, and from old Irish. And I found the pronunciation, I believe it's spelled Scathach, and the pronunciation is Skahak. Okay, as far as I could tell, that's according to a pronunciation expert on the interwebs, Skahak. But I don't know if that's accurate. But anyway, so this is super simple, and it's a legendary female warrior and martial instructor in the Ulster cycle of early Irish mythology, renowned for training elite heroes in feats of arms and combat prowess. So they would send their heroes over to this place, which was Scotland, which was known as the Sky Island, I believe, is what it was called, to learn from this ancient warrior woman who would teach the greatest heroes of the time. And it's unclear how long this person was alive, so who knows if this was sort of a demigod of sorts. But anyway, just to talk about that real quick, throw it back into the thing. We'll get back to Wing Chun and all the rest of this stuff. Welcome back, gentlemen. Thanks for being patient with the process and being fantastic friends. James, anything to add to anything that you thought of, or we'll continue on with some more of this martial arts stuff and this particular old Irish individual?
Yeah, so I was just thinking, there is one thing, and I'm not sure if it's connected to all this or not, but I've found a lot of the research I've done and the other researches I've looked into over the years, there's this pattern that people have seen where it seems like possibly women have more paranormal experiences overall, not saying across the board, than men do at times. They seem to be, in many cases, more sensitive to anomalous energies and or beings in some ways than many men do. That's not a one-to-one, because I'm a guy. I've had many experiences, but it's something I've heard about. This idea put out there that it seems like there's many more women that have experiences than men. And again, I don't think anything is that simple, but I think it's a fascinating possible correlation to all this as well.
Yeah, well said, which fits kind of right back into that, the aspect of the power of the woman that you were talking about, Dave. We can hit that, the entity, can I say this? Skahak, I guess is how you say this, who taught this individual and was sent over to the Ireland itself, which is known as the Sky Isle, I believe, back then. But it was supposed to be this fictional place that, of course, turned out to be a real place. But am I right in that this particular thing, as far as you know anyway, that this was sort of a legendary ancient woman that had been around running sort of a monastery of sorts for a long time, teaching their greatest heroes forever? Does that sound right?
Yeah, it really does sound like it was a long-established tradition, like a Shaolin temple in ancient Scotland. It was pre-Christian, and I seriously believe that it is connected to Kung Fu. My theory about this, it's, like a lot of these things, it's just built on supposition, but in my family, we are purely Scottish according to Ancestry DNA. We're just Gaelic and Norse. So I haven't got any dots outside of Britain when you look at where my ancestors come from, and they say it's thousands of years back. However, we've all got these epicanthic folds, and I've had Chinese people say to me, "You've got sort of Chinese eyes. Have you got Chinese ancestry?" No, definitely not. But especially when my kids were born, they all had it. And apparently it's a sign of the Aboriginal people of Northern Europe, like the Sami people, used to be called the Lapps, who were reindeer herders and travelled right across the north, right across Russia and, what's now China. And I think that in the ancient days there was a great similar Stone Age culture where these skills were absolutely necessary when you're living in a time when there's great roving packs of wild beasts, and you've got to fight bears and wolves and all sorts of stuff. Like, you can't, any advantage is going to be a great advantage. And I do think that the stuff that I'm talking about that I've been taught by my Chinese master is probably unbroken for 10,000 years. I really do. It's sort of simple. When you get into it, you think, my God, why doesn't everyone know this? But it's forgotten. But once you experience it, I still get excited after 30 years of doing it. I get really excited because it's a superpower. It's like I want to tell everyone, hey, guess what? Superman and Superwoman's real. And I do think that the Stone Age people developed this, and what you got in ancient Ireland and Scotland, they're very much the same people, especially the north of Ireland, the Ulster heroes, and the Scots, same people. They called it Del Raider, that whole sort of area, southwest Scotland, Northern Ireland, and that's where all these heroic stories come from. And I do believe these women maintained it, and I think the male ego is what stops males from learning this, and unfortunately it stops women because now they feel like they've got to become men to be good at stuff, or strong. They've got to become like a guy and just take a pounding and build big as muscles as they can have, whereas this ancient art suits a gentle person with a warrior's heart. You're basically a soft, kind person, but with, the less ego, the better. But when you experience it, it's like softness suddenly goes from being weak to super strong. Like I remember a switch over where I thought, wow, softness actually feels, the softer I can become, it feels like power to me. It changed from feeling like I was giving up my power to suddenly power. And it just gets more and more powerful. The longer you go with it, you have experiences, you think, wow, this is actually real. And it becomes a sort of a mountain climbing event. There's not that many people up near the top questing for this high level of stuff, but it's not because it really needs exceptional people. It's just it's not taught well, and it needs to have really willing students who will just believe you. But when it really comes down to it, it's quite simple. You just basically stop being a human and become an animal, like a beautiful animal. And I teach my students to dance. We actually dance the Kung Fu. And I say to them, forget fighting. You're not fighting. You just dance. And we put on music. We have cups of Chinese tea available. And I sort of imagine these warrior women of ancient Ireland and Scotland being a civilizing trainer of these wild young men and teaching them, like, having a big, strong body is not a disadvantage. My teacher, Susanna, said to me, you're twice my size, and if you get as good as me skill-wise in Wing Chun, then you'll be twice as powerful as me. It's just because I'm so much more skillful than you, you can't match me. But if you ever get to my level, then you'll be something to reckon with. And when I read the Viking sagas, people just don't know how they train. There's no real, treatise about how young Viking warriors were trained. But I see a lot of similarities to what I've learned, especially double-handed fighting, sort of like ability to cut people in half in one stroke. That's not really normal. That's even the sharpest blade and a big, massive arm is not going to do that. It's a real Zen samurai thing. And, the Japanese master swordsman had this thing. It's really the same thing. Have you heard of the sword and the brush? That concept?
No. I've seen the things where they try and cut like the bamboo or whatever. Is that what we're talking about? Or something else entirely?
Well, it's part of it. It's an ancient tradition in China and in Japan. It sort of came originally from China, but it's considered that the sword and the brush are one. And the great Miyamoto Musashi, who was the Kensei of Japan, the sword saint, he was like, they considered that this is a spiritual path, and it is, and it changes you as a person. But Miyamoto Musashi said a warrior should be the twofold path of sword and brush, and he should pay a lot of attention to both. What it really boils down to, as weird as this might sound, is that if you can strike with a sword in the same way you'd brush with ink on paper, then you'll cut somebody in half. It's when you stop fighting, like she said to me, be like a baby reaching for an apple, don't try to punch. Same thing, if you can be in a fight, and as you strike with a sword, it's like you're just brushing a line in ink on some big sheet of paper. That will be a perfect strike. Your whole body weight will be in it. Your mind will be in it. This sort of superpower will come out, and you'll just go through them as if they're not there. And I do think, and this is a show where I can say the weirdest things I know, but I do think at the highest level of this, what you're doing is altering reality. The other person becomes virtual, you become virtual, and there's no real strength anymore. There's no real power. It's just like a video game. And that's been my experience. Like when I pushed those two powerful guys in Scandinavia, it was like nobody was there. As soon as I disappear them, they were nothing to me because they weren't even there. They were just like ghosts. I just moved my arm, and what they felt was as if they said, I couldn't really feel you. It was like a great ball rolled at me. I just couldn't find any purchase. I couldn't push against you anymore because you sort of disappeared. So I think that's what the ancient women warrior art must have been, because what else could it be? What else would it be? Like, which is been like, right.
Yeah, real quick, which is at the heart of what you do, Viking superpowers, which was a way of looking at not just the combat aspect, but going back deep enough to understand that the way that humans did things thousands of years ago and up into the modern sort of Middle Ages, as you might describe them, is that we've just forgotten a lot. And I think you've seen it with your own eyes in this capacity that you can say, look, I've seen these things happen, and people that are very small and very slight can be very powerful in the same aspect. But it takes knowing, it takes skill, it takes practice, it takes a ton of that. And there's a couple things I want to point out as part of that. Like Bruce Lee in particular said, be water. That was one of his things, which as you're describing is that soft aspect, right? Another thing that came to mind as you were talking about this is Sun Tzu. This quote is attributed to him, but he says, it is the unemotional, reserved, calm, detached warrior who wins, not the hothead seeking vengeance and not the ambitious seeker of fortune. Straight from The Art of War. And that makes a ton of sense. Be calm, be collected, understand, be in the moment, and don't get mad at something that goes wrong. Control everything that you can control and be the best at it. And there you go. You become the greatest warrior simply by practice, by that stoic mindset that I'm always talking about. We got a question from Daryl in New York real quick. Anything to add before we go to the phones here?
Oh, just one thing, spot on about water. That's exactly what this is. And I think Bruce did know. When you stop having joints, I'm not talking about smoking them, but when you stop having joints in your body and you become one thing, which is what we aim to achieve, then everything is in it. Whatever you touch, it's like your whole body weight's in the end of your finger. And it's like water, water doesn't have joints, it doesn't think, it just goes boom. And, if you're out in the sea and a big wave hits you, it just flattens you, but it's got no intent. It doesn't mean to knock you down. It just knocks you down.
Absolutely.
So that's my little bit.
Right on. Hang tight, James. We'll get to you in just a moment here. Let's get a question from Daryl, and then we'll go to James after that and continue this with more with Viking Superpowers and James of Salsido Paranormal. What's up, Daryl in New York? You're on Troubled Minds with Mike and James and Dave. What is your question? What's on your mind tonight?
Hi, guys. That was such a good topic. I'm really enjoying this. Hold on, let me just get my notes. Let me see. My window here has got my new message. Here we go. Okay, here they go. What was I going to ask you? As far as like people teaching, like these traditions were taught to their generations of people, and then suddenly there's no more knowledge after a certain point. As far as even like teaching like the kung fu stuff, or even as far as like the materials or the weapons you were talking about that we used, the metallurgists or the doctors, let's say, or they knew how to make either potions or mix metals together to make weapons, and then suddenly the knowledge was lost due to a reset or a generational change. You know what I'm saying? That like they would make things out of really fine wood or stuff like that. Now they're making them out of particle board, things like that. Even electricity. Supposedly, we had some sort of electricity in the past, and we had to figure out how to do it again. And how people like the two women that were in different cultures, Mike was writing about. How did they have similar techniques in their fighting when they were in different parts of the world? Did they have connections? Did they ever meet each other? You know what I'm saying? And also, people that invent things at the same time in different parts of the world. Like, who was it? I forget who. It was the telephone, or I forget. Yeah, the telephone. Alexander Graham Bell invented it at the same time as somebody else, but he got kind of the credit. So the technology you were speaking of, where did we lose our superpowers or all this stuff that we used to know? That was not. Why wasn't it passed down? Where was the disconnect? You know what I'm saying? Is there any mythology on that?
Yeah. Well, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great. Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome statements and questions. Thanks for that. And I've often thought about this stuff, and I know for sure with weapons that gunpowder was the end of so many ancient arts, because you can give anyone a rifle and say you point it at the other person and you pull this thing and they get shot. So like that was the thing that destroyed the art of archery in Europe, because the gun became the thing and the archers took years and years to learn their craft and their art, and it was a high art. And suddenly overnight with gunpowder and rifles, that was the end of them. And it's happened with so many things. It's like it's happening to us now. It's like they want to put us in a wheelchair on life support, so that we just sit around and be entertained. But ancient peoples didn't have that, so they had to work at stuff, and usually you'd learn a craft for several years and then another 7 years to become a master. And then, the exquisiteness of art and every craft. And it was the same in Europe as it is in old Japan and China in the old days. People just lived the art and they made a living from it, but also it was their great love and passion.
Right.
And with the with fighting, that's a harder one to answer, but in the West, this is all new to us still. Like, I got into the first wave of Kung Fu fever in the 70s, and we were told the mystical through, say, the Kung Fu TV series we saw, that these Shaolin guys could walk like ghosts and do incredible feats, but then we'd go to somebody saying they were a Kung Fu master, and all we really learnt was basically boxing with some kicks thrown in, and all that amazing stuff wasn't there. And they'd often say, oh, well, that's more advanced, you know, like, pay me for years and I'll teach you that stuff. Give me time to try and work out what it's about. Whereas the people who really know the stuff, this is a very common human thing, but often people who are real good at stuff can't teach. They're too caught up in the high level, and it's just infuriating trying to teach klutzy beginners. And the people with the patience are not always, like, I've been teaching this for years, and it really is a challenge because we all have these mental blocks, and I still have my own blocks. It just goes, my mind goes, that can't be possible. Even though I've experienced it so many times, I still fight with that self-doubt. Maybe if I was in a temple doing it every single day, all the doubts would be gone. And now I'm retired, I'm hoping that I can become more of a real Kung Fu master and devote a lot more time to it. But it's also that we don't need to fight for a living. You know, you and I don't really need to fight. It's not like we're in the schoolyard or in prison or somewhere. There's nothing wrong if you are in prison. But, you know, there's only a few situations where you really need to fight. And I said to my master one time, I said, you know, the ability to fight by not fighting is the highest. And she said, yes, it is. You know, like I've had people try to pick me in a fight quite a few times, and I've just said, oh, I can't really fight, you know. Can we be friends? Like, what can I do to make you happy? You know, because that way I win because I don't get my teeth busted, and just costs me heaps of sitting in a dentist chair, and I don't hurt somebody else and potentially even get charged. When I practice, sometimes the power that I feel in myself is frightening, and I really literally feel like a tiger or something like that. And I just think, I mustn't use this on anyone. If I use this, I'm likely to just like break their neck with one strike. You can just feel it. It's the potential energy is frightening. So it becomes less and less likely you're going to get in a fight. So it has, for me, it takes the form of yoga. It's a beautiful practice. And you know, the weirdest thing, the high levels of Kung Fu are always full of bliss. Like, bliss and ecstasy are the characteristics of the higher levels of Kung Fu power. When you do something amazing, like when my teacher threw that guy, I bet you she felt a rush of bliss. Not because she was hurting a guy, but it's the power is blissful.
Agreed. That's the music. That means we're out of time. Daryl, appreciate the questions. Appreciate the thoughts. You were amazing. Have a fantastic night.
You too. Great show.
See you there.
Go give Daryl a follow on. Wait, did I drop James down? Sorry about that. You guys moved places at the last second. Sorry about that, James. Be right back. More Troubled Minds on the way. Don't go anywhere. We got more coming up with Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers, James Salsido of Salsido Paranormal, and your calls as well. Be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Troubled Minds. I'm your host, Michael Strange. We're streaming in all the places, all the things, taking your calls at 702-957-1037. Thank you to Daryl for the call there. We're here with Dave Lovegrove of Viking Superpowers, James Salsido of Salsido Paranormal. Tonight, I'm calling this What Else the Old Stories Remember. Warrior Women in Forgotten Places. Now, there's a lot of ways to look at this. When we look at old technology and old ways of doing things, one of the great questions is that Daryl asked, by the way, very smartly, is that when did this stop? At some point, we knew this cross-culturally, even across different points in time. But it feels as if some of this stuff has gone underground, sort of the secret society aspect or the mystery school, possibly. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's been hiding in plain sight all along, and this is what we really should be doing instead of, I don't know, playing volleyball. And no offense to volleyball enthusiasts out there, but you know what I mean. If we were all kung fu masters, then maybe we'd be a more polite society. I don't know, as the saying goes. I don't really know, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Anything to add? Chip it in. Got another 20 minutes or so with again, Dave Lovegrove, James Salsido, Salsido Paranormal. James, you've been quiet for a minute. Anything to add on any of this stuff? Great contributions so far, and I know you've been quiet, but if you got anything, I want to give you some time, and then we'll get back to Dave and the rest of these narratives we got in place here.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I was talking about this with Ricky tonight on his show earlier. I think that people have always had abilities to do different things, to sense different things. It's just that for various points in various amounts of time, that was kind of looked down upon by a lot of people, a lot of governments, religions, whatever, different organizations. Again, nothing against religion, just saying the organizations of the people involved at times, because I still find accounts from people about sensing things, sensing when there's someone around them, not even just the apparition, but just people. And I know that's a part of that as well, the martial arts and all that, and being able to pick up on more than just what you're seeing, sensing these things as well with the other senses, and just, I think, through energy. And there's a lot of that in experiences I find here and there where people are able to sense presences and or even affect energy around them and devices and all those kinds of things. So sort of not directly martial arts, so to speak, but I think it's all somewhat connected.
Well said. Fire stuff, James. What do you got on that? Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I totally agree with James, and he brings up a great point. I said it earlier that people struggle, at least in the West, to understand how a martial artist can be some kind of spiritual person, and that the art of fighting can be a spiritual path. It just tends to be just seen as a martial thing, therefore sort of brutal, bit nasty, and not in line with the gentle, loving, enlightened person. And yeah, my own battle with that was, I went on fairly early because I thought, should I really devote so much time to this? Maybe painting's enough. Yoga is obviously a non-threatening thing that's very, very similar, and I do think that Kung Fu is simply a form of yoga, and I do think they really complement each other. But I had an experience where I was doing a lot of Kung Fu practice in this meditative state, and this might seem a bit weird, but I had an experience with who I believe was like an avatar, like the original master of our style, hundreds of years ago, this little Shaolin master called Nung Maya. She was the only woman amongst these 5 elders of Shaolin Temple, and she developed Wing Chun in our legend. And I had an experience where
I'm not sure if you cut out or you're collecting your thought there. Oh, good.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah,
I
you
was
cut
just
out for
getting
just
a
a
phone
second.
call. I didn't think that.
It actually didn't
that's
come
right.
through.
Anyway,
you're good. You're good. It was silence. I just wanted to make sure your internet didn't cut
that's
out.
good.
Otherwise, I would have jumped in. You're good. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm here. So I had this experience. I won't tell you all of that, even though it's pretty far out's tale. But I was talking to this woman who, she's my great master. And I don't know if she's really there or if it's just my subconscious or an unconscious creates her, but I said, could you please give me greater Nimlik? Right now, Nimlik is the Chinese word which means power that comes from the unconscious or the subconscious mind. Lim is that mind that I talked about that's not the conscious mind, it's the mind of the body. And lick means power. So I said, could you please help me? I thought, well, I might as well just ask. I'm trying my best to improve. And as I said that, my Kung Fu studio was in half of my garage and it was quite messy. And I looked down and at my feet there was a little Japanese word on a card. And I don't know how it got there. I picked it up, I turned it over on the other side, it said God. And I realized it was the word kami, which means advanced spiritual being or a godlike being. I thought, well, that's got to be a sign. So within a week, I had the most spectacular telepathic event happen that completely convinced me that telepathy is real without a shadow of a doubt. And then people have said to me since then, if you practice any art to a higher level, it will develop your paranormal abilities, and you should stick with your Kung Fu because you put so many years into it and it's your way in. But there's all sorts of other ways people can develop these powers, but, this one for you seems to be your path. And, there's other things I do that help, but I think that there's a very clear connection between meditation and paranormal abilities, and also like modalities, as they say, that where these powers are not just, maybe reading the future or getting a message or something like that, but actually healing people, doing good things with it. And my most extraordinary experience with that was practicing under these beautiful big trees on the edge of a forest. And I'd been creating a chi ball in my hands to the extent that I'd been doing it for months, and the chi ball I'd created was real. Like I could feel it. It was sort of like a jellyfish of energy, you might say, like a ball, but it was not a ball. It was wobbly. In my mind, I could see it sort of golden. It was so real between my hands. And I went into the house, and my wife was sitting on the lounge with a pained look, and she told me she had a terrible headache. And I said, look, let's just try something. She didn't really know what I was going to do, but I stood behind her and I put this ball over her head. I thought, I hope this doesn't do something bad. But the ball was so real. And she said, oh, I can feel something. And I was bouncing the ball from hand to hand. She had her eyes closed. She said, I can feel that going back and forth. And I was just thinking, go away, headache, go away, headache, go away. And then she said, oh, I can feel my headache draining out of my head. It's like there's water running through my head and the headache's just going. And that was sort of irrefutable. And then the next day I was doing the same ball and it was really, really strong. And so I came in and she said, oh, no, I don't need it. I haven't got a headache today. I said, well, let's just try it anyway. So I put this ball, put her head in the ball and I'm bouncing it around. She said, well, I can feel that moving. And I just kept thinking, I love this woman. This woman's my dear wife. She's my best friend. I've really enjoyed spending so many years with her. I was just feeling love for her. And she turned and said, I can feel really strong love. Like that's all I can feel is love. So I was convinced that this was not just a kung fu power, but it had given me, well, I healed her of the headache, and it's not a big deal, but once I feel one thing like that, I think, well, who knows what's possible? And people listening will probably think, well, that sounds like Reiki, or there's lots of amazing therapies that people say are real. And I must admit, I've been a bit skeptical in the past, but experiences like that have made me think, yeah, I think those people are telling the truth, that there really is something about this.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Reiki as well. I've got an anecdote about that. So a friend of mine has been practicing Reiki for a long time. He was here in Vegas. This was maybe 5 years ago. We were hiking up a hill real quick. And I say hill, it's like a small mountain, because we were trying to get like a shot of the below the Vegas Valley. And then we also had a drone. We were going to send it up and then kind of get like but the sun was going down. So it was like, okay, we got to hustle up there. And he's about 5 years younger than me and in much better shape. And we get near to the top of where we're going, and I'm just following him, like huffing it as hard as I can. And I'm about to die. Like my lungs are about to pop out my nose. It was horrible. And I literally became like this oxygen deprived. Like I started swaying, and like, it was bad. It was really bad. Like one of those situations where if you take the wrong step with sort of a dizzy head, you're going to tumble back down the mountain you came. And he grabs me, and he sits me down on the rock gently, and he gets in front of me, and he does this thing with his hands. He's doing some kind of like Reiki practitioner stuff with his hands, right? And I'm like Tweety birds flying above my head. I'm like I can't, like, I know he's blocking me, so if I fall, he'll catch me. So it's no big deal to me. I'm not scared or worried. I'm just like, am I ever going to get my breath back? And 30 seconds later, I start to come to and whatever. And so I wonder what level of sort of his sort of intervention there, one, physically protecting me, but then secondary, doing what you described was sort of that chi energy. And just a quick anecdote as part of that, but I want to ask you about that energy. So it persists. So if you're creating sort of this chi energy in your hands, this ball, this, sort of plasma orb or whatever, for lack of a better explanation and describing it, it does persist to the next day. You can go to sleep and then it kind of persists and then you continue working on this. Like, how does that actually work? Can you tell us about that?
I haven't reached a level where it persists. I actually find that it won't start up sometimes, and it'll just leave at the wrong time. I'll just think, "Wait, go away." It's really such a wonderful thing. But sometimes I'm on, and other times I really struggle to get anything. And I used to get quite disappointed about this, and then it came to me that it's like a wild thing. And this is sort of part of my theory about what the Kung Fu's about, why it's quite difficult, and maybe why women are traditionally better at it is because it's not a tame mind. It's like a horse or a kangaroo or, a bird, like something that you can't tame by rules and regulations and by forcing and punishing and giving a piece of sugar. Like, I know you can do that to a horse, so maybe that's not the best. But, a real wild animal, and what the horse whisperers do is, my uncle was a horse whisperer and he was quite famous for it. And he told me that he just connected to the mind of the animal and sort of became one with them. And I do think that for us as humans, there's the human part, which is all rules-based, text-based, time-based. And then there's the side of you that's a wild creature. And it's gentle but dangerous. It's can't coerce it. You've got to wait for it. You've got to stay really still and let it come to you and nibble. And you got to make friends of it the way a horse whisperer does it. And that's, I like what you're saying about it persisting. I've had one or two experiences like that, but generally for me, I mean, most of my Kung Fu buddies don't believe that I even experienced this. They think this is too weird. Whereas I think, I've talked to some of the older Chinese guys and they've cautiously said, well, yeah, you know, what you're doing is a higher level, but very few people sort of find it, you know. You've got to have a certain type of mind to accept it. And then because it is this infuriating thing that you can't just force to do your will, you've got to wait for it. But I tell you, when it comes, it's something really interesting. And I'll just tell you one thing. Like I get this feeling in my hands as if there's a little black hole spinning in the middle of my palm. It's like really, really heavy and powerful, but floating. And it's a really cool feeling. It's like pure power. And we had these big swords and blunt. And it was at a conference, and what was supposed to happen was the other person would hold the top of the blades, and you'd try to push them without clenching your fist and see if you could not just buckle. And I had this super power going on in my hands, and I picked up these swords, and the guy was holding it, and I went like that, and he just got crushed onto the ground. It didn't hurt him. I said, push as hard as you can, you know, try your best to stop me. And it was just like when I pushed those guys with my hand, it was like nobody was there. And this time I could feel it, like this weight was spinning in my hand, and it seemed to extend right up the sword. So when the guy touched it, I knew it was just nothing to move him, because that power I was feeling in my hand was in the whole sword. So, yeah, it's what you're saying is very real. But I think that level where you wake up with it, that's really a triumph to make it your own, you know?
Yeah. So that the next level stuff,
yeah.
I was just curious because here's why I asked the question, because you said you were working on it for months, but you were practicing it, and then you were able to sort of create it during the day in your waking hours. So I do wonder if it kind of persists in that dream space, the Aboriginal dream space, which we were supposed to get to tonight, but we're out of time. I'll knock that down as the first place to get into for the next time we do this series together. But so it was a practice thing. It was not sort of a chi ball you had been working on for months and was persistent. It was actually you were practicing and then able to sort of conjure it throughout the day. Am I right? So I misunderstood entirely. I thought you meant it was persistent across like sleep spaces and whatnot.
No, but one of my Chinese friends, who I consider one of the masters, he said to me, it's like a living thing, and you talk to it and you say, he calls it chi, but he said, it's like a living thing, and this also fits into my idea that it's like a wild animal. He said, you thank it for coming, and then when you've finished practicing, you put it away. You sort of thank it. You thank it for everything it's taught you, and then you put it away. So you sort of turn it off. And I'm ashamed to admit this, but I haven't practiced it for a couple of years. I've been into all sorts of other things, and I've just started to get back in because I've been just remembering it. Like as we're talking now, I'm thinking I shouldn't have stopped doing it, because nobody else does it. It's just my thing. And I've even had masters who are pretty amazing, but say, I don't know if that's really worth it, Dave. But Chinese people have said, yep, do it. Yeah, you're onto it. It's just that Westerners don't know this, and a heck of a lot of Asian practitioners don't know it anymore. They've forgotten it.
Which is exactly the point.
But people are scared of things like that.
Yeah,
the paranormal scares people.
Exactly. Excuse me, I'm choking over here. But especially when you have the ridicule aspect to it, which is a perfect segue to go back to James as part of this. So I don't know if you, in the paranormal actual observations you've done over the years, like hundreds and hundreds of things, like cases and studies and all kinds of stuff James has done. Do you have any insight on this sort of chi and the energy of conjuring something? Do you think it does kind of fit that paranormal aspect at all, James? What's your take on that?
it's really amazing because it's reminding me a lot about people attempting to communicate with spirits, with other entities, with other consciousness. Even in the way that you try to call out to it, to summon it in a way, so to speak, and then you put it away or you say goodbye to it. It is reminding me of different things. The most common, probably well-known example would be a spirit board or Ouija board, but there's other things as well. But even just the sensitivity, a lot of that, it seems like from what I've read and heard and experienced myself, once someone has one experience, a lot of times they will have more over time. And some people have anomalous things happen to them every day, all day. Others, it's more a few times a week. Others, hardly ever. But it's the similarities between focusing on that energy and then again focusing on other beings, other consciousness. To me, is the similarities there are really fascinating.
Yeah, well said. Well said, all that. Read this from Derek the Night Stalker. He says in the chat, maybe that's what orbs are. They're invisible when humans do it. But if spirits practice it on the other side, they can make one that we can see. Maybe the ones that we do, they can see.
Yeah.
I don't know. I actually made a note of that. We're gonna circle back to that because that's a fascinating idea. Yeah, I made a note of that. We'll get back to that. Just about out of time. You were incredible, both of you gentlemen. Thanks for being gracious with your time, and again, understanding the process and waiting through the breaks and stuff, and the imperfections of myself. Dave Lovegrove, Viking Superpowers. Please give him a follow on all the places. Links are in the description for both of these gentlemen. Again, Viking Superpowers, The Way of Asgard is the name of the book. Please go buy that. It's on Amazon. You can probably buy it tonight, get it tomorrow. It's that fast. That's how fast these things work. And also go follow his YouTube channel. It's completely free. Do the same with James. Again, his book, Salsido Paranormal Experiences, linked below. Follow him on YouTube. Follow him on the podcast platforms. Do all the things. Help our friends, salsidoparanormal.com. About 2.5 minutes left or so. Dave, final thought on this. Lots of things to kind of tackle here, and we'll get back to them. So don't worry. God willing, we got some more time. But final thought, my man.
Well, I think it's time to bring back the women martial art masters. And if anyone who wants to encourage me, please do, because I've sat on my hands with this for many years, and sometimes women have said, women are not interested in Kung Fu, it's too much of a hard sell, blah, blah, blah. But I really feel like I've been given this for a reason, and somebody needs to do it. There's so many women in peril, every time they just go out to the shops or something, they know that they're a target because of their beauty and femininity. Certain bad criminal people will always target women. And this art was developed for just that. It's so as a women. And my teacher, Susanna, she got she had no interest in Kung Fu, and then she got mugged in Sydney. And I don't know whether there was violence involved, but she seems to have been really shocked by it. So she just uprooted. She'd made a lot of money early in life. Maybe came from a wealthy family, I'm not sure, but she just left Australia, went to Hong Kong, trained for 11 years, every single day, full time, with our old master, who incidentally was a very, very close student with Yip Man, the famous guy that they made all those Yip Man movies about Wing Chun. So she came back just like a literal tiger, the essence to me of women's Kung Fu. And she taught for years. She's retired from it now. But, I think that legacy, they put so much money here in Australia, I'm sure they do over there, to programs to try and help women stay safe. I think I've got to stop holding back and get out there and tell people, look, this is real. Let me show you how it works. And, all the other things, as you say, Mike, will come from it. All the other spiritual, psychic things will undoubtedly flow from that.
Amen. Hopefully. There's an old line from a song that's what is it? Old man, don't lay so still. You're not yet young. There's time to teach. So us old guys still got a thing or two to give back to the world, and I think it's on us, old men and women. I mean old guys because I'm making fun of us, but the older generation has something to give back, and I think it's on us to do our best to make sure that wisdom doesn't get lost. Every one of us has some wisdom that somebody out there needs to hear, and if we're not doing anything about it, we're not doing anything about it. You're the best. You guys are both incredible. Thanks for staying up late with us. Thanks for being part of this, and always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. Don't forget, follow these gentlemen. Dave Lovegrove, Viking Superpowers. James Salsido, SalsidoParanormal.com. The name of his book is Salsido Paranormal Experiences. Links are in the description. Please help our friends. That's what this is about. That's exactly what this is about. It's sharing ideas. It's about being that old man, and it's still time. There's still time left to teach. So while we got it, let's do it. You guys are the best. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being a part of this. Thanks for being my friends. Have a fantastic night. Troubled Minds out. Michael Strange out. We'll see you guys on Tuesday. Have a great one.
Yes.
Indeed. Indeed. All right, going to kill the stream. I owe you one, Carl. We got a guest here, so I don't want to make everybody sit through another 5 minutes of a song. I'll play it in the Discord when we're done. There we go. Troubled Minds out.